All praise is due to Allah and the person of Master Farah Muhammad. My name is Brother Minister YaSin Allah, and I'm here again to deliver the preachings and teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, that the black man is God and the white man is the devil. That the old world of the white man, the world of murder, lies, and robbery is going out, and the new world of the black man, the world of freedom, justice, and equality is coming in. Our subject today is taken from chapter 17 of the Holy Qur'an, entitled The Israelites. Before we begin our subject, I'd like to open up in the name of Allah and the person of Master Farah Muhammad, the great Mahdi, who was to come and has come, to restore us who are lost from our own, the kingdom of Islam, and to destroy those who have destroyed us. All praise is due to Allah and the person of Master Farah Muhammad. Again, my name is Brother Minister YaSin Allah, and I'm here to deliver the preachings and teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad. Our subject again is taken from chapter 17 of the Holy Qur'an, entitled The Israelites, or in the Arabic language, Bani Israel. And I was inspired to teach on chapter 17 of the Quran, the Israelites, from Minister Farrakhan's visit to Newark last Sunday. And he, among many other things that he taught on, he mentioned Prophet Muhammad of 1400 years ago, his night journey, and which is known as Isra and Miraj. And that event in Prophet Muhammad's history is taken from chapter 17 of the Quran, the Israelites. And before we get into that, I would just like to comment first on what's going on in the political world in this country. And we see that the white race is, especially those that's the leaders of the country, are very confused people, very hateful people, and that much of their hatred is directed toward the black man and black woman in this country. There was one incident in particular that illustrates this hatred and confusion and lies that white people are, by nature, this is what they do. And there was an incident where 4 United States servicemen were killed in the African country of Niger, and one of them, 3 were white, 1 was black. And Trump called the mother of the black serviceman, David Johnson, and was talking to the sister on the phone, and purportedly to offer his condolences over the loss of his son, on basically a mission that he, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, sent him on. And he came out later from a United States congressman from Florida, a sister named Frederica Wilson, that Trump was very disrespectful and purportedly offering his condolences. And this became a big controversy. And of course, Trump denied it. And what compounded the injury, in my opinion, was when Trump's chief of staff, 4-star Marine general by the name of John Kelly, he appeared a day or 2 later before the press and attempted to back up Trump's version of events and to slander and disparage Congressman Wilson by saying that she has a history of grandstanding, and he pointed out a particular event in which she allegedly or purportedly grandstanded at commemorating a opening up the FBI headquarters in Florida. I think it was in Miami. And he kind of talked about, the sister, kind of bad. And, he basically impugned her character. And shortly thereafter, it came out, they had videotape of the event that he was referencing, and it showed quite clearly that John Kelly is a liar, and that he, maliciously slandered this woman based on a lie. There was no fact the video spoke for itself, how the sister was very eloquent and respectful of 2 slain FBI agents who were killed in Miami, and how she did all she could in order to expedite naming the FBI building after the 2 slain officers. And then, nowhere in that videotape did she engage in any self-aggrandizement. So my point is that the media and many of the political pundits have thought John Kelly, Trump's chief of staff, to be a man of reason and integrity, but the fact of the matter is he's just like Trump. He's a liar. And, he will say anything in order to, sway public opinion in their quarters. And, it really comes as no surprise, because why would someone who was different than Trump in terms of having integrity and being truthful, be around Trump, work for Trump? So, alhamdulillah. And it's just another lesson in how white people tell lies. And we as black people, the black nation, should be always cognizant of how white people engage in falsehood. And that's part of their nature, because they were made under a condition of falsehood. Praise be to Allah. A condition of lies. Remember, Yaqub told lies and committed murder in order to bring about the white race. Alhamdulillah. So our subject matter is chapter 17, entitled The Israelites. And Minister Farrakhan, in the many things that he spoke on Sunday, he mentioned Prophet Muhammad's night journey, which is it's commonly called in Arabic. They call it, it's known by 2 names, Isra and Miraj. And Israel, I think, according to the Arabic scholars, is the first stage of his night journey, Miraj. And basically, his night journey was that he had a vision, if you will. He was in Mecca, and that he had this vision that he was swept up on a white horse and taken to Jerusalem. And while at Jerusalem, I believe he led prayer of all the prophets, led the prayer with all the prophets and part of the congregation. And from there, the angel Jibril or Gabriel took him through the 7 heavens. And as he ascended through the 7 heavens, he met all the prophets, all the major prophets, if you will. And until finally, when he got to the 7th heaven, he met God face to face. And it was during that time of meeting with God face to face that God commanded him to teach the people to pray 50 times a day. And that when he left, Musa asked him, what did God, tell him or want done? And he told him about, he wants the people to pray 50 times. So Moses was like a intercessor or intermediary, that praying 50 times a day was too much. And Moses sent Prophet Muhammad back several times to get the number lowered, until finally Allah, God, decided that 5 times a day was sufficient prayer, and that each prayer counted for 10 prayers. Alhamdulillah. And Minister Farrakhan was equating Prophet Muhammad's night journey with an experience that he had. And it would appear that he had a dream that he went on a night journey, if you will, and met the Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad and received some instructions from him. So that's not really our subject matter, and I want to do another part to this video dealing with that, but and Prophet Muhammad's night journey in general, and more specifically, and the meaning of it. But I just wanted to touch on chapter 17 of the Quran, because it's a very instructive chapter in terms of the history of the white race. And actually I wanted to do this subject a while back, but I got sidetracked doing other things. So now I'm doing it. So alhamdulillah. First, I'm going to read a few verses from chapter 17, and then I'll offer interpretation based on Maulana Muhammad Ali's interpretation, the great translator and commentator of the Holy Qur'an, based on the teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad. And I'm not saying that Maulana Muhammad Ali's commentary is based on the teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, but it coincides with Mr. Muhammad's teachings about the right race. Glory to him who carried his servant by night from the sacred mosque to the remote mosque, whose precincts we bless that we might show him of our signs. Okay, so the servant here is Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and that he left from Mecca, the sacred mosque, to the remote mosque, which is Jerusalem. And they're calling the temple at Jerusalem, the Jewish temple at Jerusalem, the remote mosque, alhamdulillah, whose precincts we bless that we might show him of our signs. That's verse 1. And verse 2. And we gave Moses the book and made it a guidance to the children of Israel, saying, take no guardian besides me. Now, the fact that Prophet Muhammad was transported in his night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem is very significant, because we must remember, from a historical point of view, Jerusalem became the spiritual center of the Jews, or the white race. Remember that Moses or Musa went into the caves and hillsides of Europe after the white race was exiled there for 2,000 years, and he gave them the Torah, or he taught them Islam and how to master the original man. And in doing that, the white race became the leaders of the white race as being the recipients of divine revelation from a messenger, prophet of Allah, Moses, alhamdulillah. And again, as the Quran teaches, and we gave Moses the book and made it a guidance to the children of Israel, saying, take no guardian besides me. Now, it also, the book, of course, is the teachings of Moses, or the Torah. And we should bear in mind, too, that in the Quran, the children of Israel is referring to, or are referring to, the white race. Now, recently, perhaps in the last few years, there's some controversy over who the children of Israel are. And we're not really going to deal with that, but just as one piece of evidence that it refers to the white race, again, the Quran calls the white race the children of Israel, also the people of the book. Now, let us bear in mind, too, that the name Israel comes from chapter 32 in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, that Jacob, or Yaakov's name, was changed from Jacob to Israel. So let's bear that in mind. And so when we hear the term children of Israel, another way of thinking about that is saying, O children of Jacob, or O children of Yaakov. Alhamdulillah. So the children of Israel are advised upon receiving the law of Moses that take no guardian besides me. In other words, believe in no other God besides me, Allah. I'm sending you a prophet. I'm giving you divine guidance, and that do as you're instructed, follow the guidance, and you will be blessed. And incidentally, we know that the Quran also teaches very clearly in several places how the white race under the name of children of Israel was blessed. Because remember, all the prophets from Moses or Musa to Jesus were sent to the white race, and the scholars refer to those line of prophets as the Israelite prophets. But the white race is charged from the very beginning, after receiving the law of Moses, of not following the prophets, rejecting or rebelling against the law of Moses. In verse 4 it teaches, and we made known to the children of Israel in the book, certainly you will make mischief in the land twice and behave insolently with mighty arrogance. So here it's taught that the white race disregarded, disobeyed the law of God, rebelled against the law of Allah, and as a result thereof, they suffered two great chastisements in their history. And so, in understanding these verses from Allah and His Qur'an, is that while the white race presents themselves as the true followers of God and His law, once you understand their history, you can see very clearly that they are far from the representatives of God and the enemies of God, and that their history is replete, or even the framework of their history, the underpinnings of their history, is all based on the fact that they rebelled against their law, the law of Moses. And because of that, they were repeatedly chastised. So when of the two the first warning came to pass, we raised against you our servants of mighty prowess, so they made havoc in your houses, and it was an accomplished threat. So the first warning, or the first chastisement referred to, is when Babylon, under Nebuchadnezzar, invaded Jerusalem and sacked Jerusalem, conquered Jerusalem, and slaughtered many of the Jews, and those that were left alive he transported or deported to Babylon, where they became the slaves and servants of the Babylonians. And you find that history in the book of Daniel goes into that history, where you got the children of Israel, the prophets, if you will, subjected to Babylonian rule, and that they were fed the wrong foods, and they were suffering ill health, and things of this nature that you find in the book of Daniel. But my point is that that's the chastisement that they suffered for disobeying the law of Islam. And this began, or not began, but continued what the Jews call the diaspora, them being scattered around different parts of the world from their spiritual center, Jerusalem, and this serves as a chastisement on them. And we should understand that, and we should also bear in mind, again, that the Jews are representatives or leaders of the white race, while the Gentiles, though being mighty in power, are referred to pagan or people who are non-followers of the law of Moses. Alhamdulillah. And of course, the Babylonians were not the first nation to invade Israel, if you will. Historically, the Assyrians invaded before the Babylonians, and they conquered the 10 northern tribes and deported them back to Syria before the Babylonians. So, but the Quran doesn't mention that as a particular chastisement, but it definitely, according to the interpretation of Muhammad Ali on this verse, is referring to the Babylonians conquering the Jews and deporting them to Babylon, which was a mighty chastisement. And alhamdulillah. Then we gave you back to turn against them, and aided you with the wealth and children, and made you a numerous band. So while they were in Babylonian captivity, Cyrus, from a historical point of view, granted a decree that the that the Jews could return to Israel. So now Allah chastised them, and now they're being given a reprieve to go back to their homeland, or their spiritual center, Jerusalem. And Cyrus died actually before they could be returned back home, and Darius honored Cyrus's decree. And the Jews were led back to Jerusalem by Zerubbabel. And Zerubbabel is, I believe Zerubbabel means son of Babylon, but nonetheless, he was the leader of the Jews who he led them back to Jerusalem. And of course, Zerubbabel is regarded or revered by the Masons as an ancient Grand Master as well. Probably because he, if not aided or worked on rebuilding the temple, that his work of leading the Jews back to Jerusalem led to the rebuilding of the temple. Alhamdulillah. And so you can find that history of the Jews returning to Jerusalem in the Bible under books like Nehemiah, Ezra, maybe even Haggai. Definitely Nehemiah and Ezra goes into the history of the Jews being led back to Jerusalem out of Babylonian captivity. And if you do good for your own souls, and if you do evil, it is for them. So when the second warning came, we raised another people that they might enter the mosque as they entered it the first time, and that they might destroy whatever they conquered with utter destruction. So now Allah in His Qur'an says, if you do good, you're going to be blessed. If you do evil or wickedness, violate the law of God, you're going to suffer chastisement. So, the Jews were blessed to prosper in Jerusalem. However, and they have a history of rejecting the prophets, but when they rejected Jesus, this set up the second great chastisement for them. And them instigating the death of Jesus at the hands of the Romans 70 years after, I believe it was 70 years after the death of Jesus, that the Romans, led by Titus, one of the Roman generals who eventually became one of their emperors, invaded Jerusalem to put down a revolt from the Jews, and eventually he conquered them and they sacked Jerusalem. And this was prophesied by Jesus, I think in Matthew chapter 23, that their house would remain desolate, meaning that the Romans would conquer them and utterly destroy Jerusalem, and the Jews again would be dispersed. And many of the Jews from that were exiled to Arabia, of all places. Alhamdulillah. But again, these verses speak to how the Jews received the law of Moses, was blessed to receive divine chastisement, were blessed to receive divine guidance, and because they disobeyed the law of God embodied in the law of Moses, they were chastised with two great chastisements. When the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem and deported the Jews back to Babylon, and again centuries later when after they rejected Jesus, the Romans conquered Jerusalem, sacked Jerusalem, destroyed Jerusalem, and the Jews were dispersed another time. Alhamdulillah. So this chapter is aptly entitled, chapter 17 in the Quran, the Israelites, because it's talking about their plight and the ramifications of them disobeying the law of God. Alhamdulillah. It may be that your Lord will have mercy on you, and if you return to mischief, we will return punishment, and we have made hell a prison for the disbelievers. So, in addition to the history of the Israelites, Allah in His Quran is also teaching us that every deed has a consequence. You know, for every action there's a reaction. What goes around comes around. The Hindus call it the law of karma. We know this. And this is one of the universal laws, the just law of compensation. And this applies to everyone, Muslim, Jews, Christians, all people are subject to the universal, laws of nature, or the law of Allah, if you will. Alhamdulillah. Now, it should be, it's also instructive to note that in Prophet Muhammad's night journey, in his vision, that he was transported from Mecca to the Temple of Jerusalem And from the temple of Jerusalem, he ascended to the seven heavens. So the symbolism of him being ascending to the seven heavens above the temple of Jerusalem means that Islam will triumph over the white race, which is a very, very powerful sign if we understand it. Because remember, the white race was given the rule of the planet for 6,000 years. In chapter 2 of the Qur'an, remember, it teaches very clearly that the children of Israel were made to excel the nations of the earth. That refers to their 6,000 rule over the earth or over the black nation. But Prophet Muhammad had this vision or received this revelation that Islam would eventually surpass or reassert itself as the black nation would reassert itself as the leader of the planet Earth, alhamdulillah, or the rulers of the planet Earth. So again, as I said at the beginning, that these interpretations of Maulana Muhammad Ali coincide with the teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad. So that's why they are very important and very powerful in terms of us understanding the history of our planet for the last 6,000 years, in terms of what has transpired and what will come. Now, Maulana Muhammad Ali also goes into some of the history of Prophet Muhammad's followers after the death of Prophet Muhammad, and how they too disobeyed and strayed away from the teachings of Allah and this Quran through Prophet Muhammad, and they too were chastised. And they suffered two great chastisements in their history. And one was when the Mongols invaded. They didn't reach Arabia, but they invaded, the Mongols invaded Arab lands in Syria especially, and they wreaked some serious havoc on the Muslims at that day and time. And that was when the Abbasid Caliphate was weak and wasn't following the law of Islam. So Allah raised a mighty foe, as the Quran says, one of his servants. So, you know, Allah uses whom he pleases as an instrument in order to accomplish a goal. So he used the Mongols, the descendants of Genghis Khan, in order to chastise the Muslims. And it was a serious chastisement, and they suffered greatly. And it wasn't until I think the Battle of Ayan Galut, if my pronunciation is correct, in Syria, under the Caucasian general that day and time, Baybar, who is still a national hero of the Syrians, he stopped the Jerusalem invasion. So my point is, all the history is, you know, of course, very interesting. But my point is that, yes, even the Muslims themselves suffered chastisement for disobeying Allah. And, you know, nothing is spooky, everything is real. So, you know, Allah is like, okay, you don't want to listen? Well, here's an enemy, and let's see what you do with this. And of course, we know that the Mongols, you know, historically, you know, are reputed to be very, very vicious and, you know, some rough customers. And they put something on the Muslims and the Arabs in that day and time. And then the Arabs suffered another serious chastisement. Well, after that, you know, the Turks under the Ottoman Empire became the ruling caliph in the Arab world. And when they got weak and tired and, you know, could no longer follow the law of Islam, then they lost, you know, they lost their power to the white race, the Europeans, because, you know, the Ottoman Empire, they got down with Germany in World War I. They were on the decline. And they got down with Germany. Germany lost World War I. And eventually they lost, you know, control of the Middle East. And, you know, Islam has been on its heels ever since. Ever since the end of World War I, Islam has been on its heels. And this is representative of another chastisement that Allah sent on the Muslims, you know, for disobeying the law of Islam. So, you know, let us understand our history and how the law of Allah works. That not only is the white race subject to the law of Islam, everyone is subject to the law of Islam, or, you know, every deed or action has its consequence. Praise be to Allah. So, as I close this this video, and we don't want to make it too long and drawn out with a lot of different histories, and we don't want the listener and the watcher to become bored. But nonetheless, Prophet Muhammad, just to recap, Prophet Muhammad, and this was early in his prophethood, had a dream, or what they call a night vision, that he was transported on a white horse from Mecca to Jerusalem. And while at Jerusalem, he led the prophets in prayer. And from that point, he was led by Jibril, or taken by Jibril, and ascended through the seven heavens. And while he was ascending through the seven heavens, he met all the major prophets, especially the Israelite prophets. And once he got to the seventh heaven, he met God face to face. And Prophet Muhammad ascending through the seven heavens and meeting God face to face is symbolic to Islam triumphing over the white race, as Jerusalem is symbolically the spiritual center of the Jews or the white race in that day and time. So without any further ado or delay, I'd like to thank everyone who took a few minutes out their day to view this video. If you like it, give me a like, and subscribe to the Elijah Muhammad Explained YouTube channel. There are several videos on there, all going into different parts of the teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, and staying as close to the way Mr. Muhammad taught it as possible for me in this day and time. So without any further ado or delay, I'd like to close out in the name of Allah, the person of Master Muhammad, the great Mahdi, who was to come and has come to restore us who were lost from our own the kingdom of Islam, and to destroy those who have destroyed us. And before I close, some may wonder why I don't open and close using the Fatiha and the Quran. And the reason why I use this particular prayer, which is at the end of Message to the Black Man, is because I want to just reinforce the point that Master Farad Muhammad, Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, the great Mahdi, is a God that the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad gave us, and he said that he is the fulfillment of the Christ of the Christians, the second coming of Jesus of the Christians, the Mahdi of the Muslims, and the Messiah, Deuteronomy 18:18, sending a prophet of the Jews. In this case, the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, sending a man like Moses. And I just want to reinforce that so we can bear in mind and don't lose track or get off the wrong path as to whose teachings that we are under for the next 1,000 years. So with that, I bid you, Assalamu alaikum. Peace, peace.